Hello, good evening. We are back with the SAP IP Business Talks. We are today here in Germany, in Bavaria, close to the Alps, with Stefan Konrath. I'm very happy that he is today here. And we have also a credit guest, Tobias Lipp. He is available on LinkedIn, live for you. We are live. That means we are happy when you tell us what you're interested, what you would like to ask to Stefan Konrath. He will introduce himself for you just to know 45 minutes, and would be great when you give us your questions which you are interested in the live talk and at LinkedIn, that we can react here. So, Stefan, thank you very much for being with us. We talk today about AI, and your company, Eve AI Intelligence. So, tell us a little bit what you're doing, what is your company doing, how do you deal with startups? We talk about today about digital startups and market trends. So first of all, thank you very much that you are here, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Alexander, for inviting me to this talk today. I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and I'd love to talk to you anyway. I admire the work you're doing in the IP business. It's been wonderful. Yeah, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to your questions. But to have questions in mind, you probably have to know a little bit more about what we are doing. So I founded a company which is called EY, October 2019. So it's pretty young, still in the early stages. And what we do is we do analyze text elements. I don't want to be too abstract, maybe to give you an idea of what we're doing. Alexander, can you show me? Can you open the slide, please? I think this gives you a little bit of an idea. So what we deal with is text in the widest sense. It could be anything. You can see it from the icons on the left. It could be a TV signal, a TV show, a broadcast. It could be a radio cast. It could be newspaper, online newspapers, or social media. We take all that inside of our engine and, so to say, digest it and trying to figure out what's the meaning in the text. So this gives us insights about how companies and ideas are presented in a certain context. So that's why we call ourselves context people. So this is at the very core of what we're doing. I have a slide here which a little bit shows much more of the idea of the technical infrastructure. This is much about how the things we had to have in mind as a startup to think about, can we protect that kind of IP in the business? And as you can see, so we have a kind of input lines, so it's kind of pipeline system of data, and it's text data, what we call unstructured data. And this goes inside of an engine, and there's some hidden secret, a black system which is working here, doing the maps and trying to figure out what's in the text. And what we have in the end is a kind of a model of a market. So to come back for a second to the example, if you look at this slide and you have a text like Swiss and the expensive pilot problem, most of you might not be in Germany at the moment, so we have strikes. Lufthansa is striking at the moment. People can't take their flights. This could be an article about something like that, and we look inside of that article, and we know Lufthansa has been mentioned, and there's a strike, there's a union active in that field, and we know what's happening. So it's a negotiation process, it's a protest form, such things. This is what we are looking for. Thanks for sharing that. I think we can stop it for a moment. So this is one part, and the second part is I actually run also kind of a group of interested people, which is called AI Swiss, which is one of the largest communities in the AI field. We start in Switzerland, although I'm German, I'm located in Germany, and it's already about 4,500 people. And what we do is we think about how we can apply the maths and logic of artificial intelligence in the industry.
Okay, thank you very much. Wonderful. So we would like to talk about startups and the way how the startups come into the business, and basically, of course, our audience is at the end then interested in IP. But let's start with the startup per se, and basically we have two different kinds of approaches. We have these technology startups which typically from the university they have something which is new, which is very powerful, their technology, and then they try to find applications, customers for their technology or technology based solution. So we could call it technology push. And we have other startups which are more or less the opposite. They say, okay, I see in the market there is a need, and whatever I want to do or not, I try to fulfill that need, first of all. And so a kind of market pull. What would you say? So how does these two different starting points, which kind of impact does that have to their strategy of these companies, of these startups?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing. I myself, I do not come from academia, right? So we have academia in the advisory board, so I'm connected to the universities. But originally, EY was built out of the market. So the second example you gave, so when you were talking about we had an actual problem in the market, I saw, which I wanted to address by technology. And looking at the strategies of those kind of, actually, I think there are even three groups of startups. They are indeed different because the starting point is different. If you come from academia, you have not a market problem, first of all, in mind. You have a technological or a scientific problem in mind, which you're going to solve. So the hardest challenge for those who come from academia is to solve the problem of being abstract and not result driven and not economic in the terms of how you address it into an economic domain. So moving in a different domain there in this case. So you have to think about, does it make sense for a company or what kind of institution you're actually serving in the end? What are we really looking for? And so the biggest challenge for them is to actually close that gap. And it's in the beginning, it's very huge. So you have a very abstract thing, you solve it by technology, and you actually think you have done something worth and very new, which is good for patents, right? But on the other hand, it might be not understood by the companies. You have to break it down in something which they can understand, which really solve a market problem. So this is their challenge. There's another aspect from funding. So this was more like, okay, we have to build a strategy, which means make it market ready. The second is, if you think about funding, it's, you usually have public funding, right? There's a lot, especially in Germany, you have a lot of programs from the public domains, which help scientific researchers, academics, to move into startups, to actually spin off things, ideas. So there's some funding which helps a lot for the first 2 years, which is great for them. It's more difficult if you come from the market side like I do. So the funding is public, and you usually have a runway of at least 2 years, I would say, if you get the public funding for the research you're doing. While in this domain I'm in, you have to fund yourself. So it's bootstrapped. Yeah, you have to find either business angels, or you have your own money which you bring in, and you have a time frame which is not 2 years. You have maybe 4 weeks for first prototype, and 3 to 6 months for a kind of early prototype for the market, kind of mock. And this is a completely different challenge. So we have to face the problem that we need to get to the market very early. So we need to start from a real problem because we need to get the money in. And if you don't want to over rely too much on investors, the pressure is even harder. So like me, yeah.
There is a very interesting question rising up on LinkedIn, and you mentioned the financial situation, and obviously the difficulty getting public money, getting private money. A question which arises is, what do you think? Which role plays IP? I would say here, especially having a brand or a protected brand, having a patent for technology. What is the role of IP in such funding rounds? What is your experience here?
So I would say if you come from the scientific background, so from academia, it's the first natural thing you do, right? You're trying to protect IP, you're trying to protect the research you have done. So that makes perfect sense. And investors into those kind of startups actually expect that. It's part of the asset they're trying to get. And from
Do you really think that it is an asset? I mean, my experience is just a little bit different. So typically, we say that having, for example, a patent or patent application typically is not really an asset in terms of it is really helping, but it is signaling something. Yeah. So it signals, for example, that you are inventive, that there is something new, that you have a certain, let's say, technical credibility. So because at the end, investors invest in people and not in patents. So
yes.
I mean, it's just a different experience. I have never heard that VCs or early stage investors are really investing in patents.
Yeah, maybe we have to dig deep into the mindset of an investor. So I completely agree with you to say that the team matters, right? The team is usually the thing. It's not the presentation, basically. It's the team, the background that the team has. Do they fit in terms of what kind of personalities they have and what kind of skills they have? Such things. That's right. But you know that all those investors and we talk about that part of the startups, right? Like academic startups. So those kind of investors do their due diligence, which means they try to find out what kind of technology might be an answer to future problems and how large might be the market for that kind of problem. So, and one thing is to say, and you see more risk-averse investors nowadays because of the crisis, because of the war. It's even getting harder, right? So we're trying to mitigate the risk of investing. And trying to mitigate the risk means if there's nothing you have in the end, so if you have to actually close the company, you have at least something which you can sell, which is the patent in the end. So this is why this is a part of the calculation we do, the maths. And in that sense, yes, it's definitely an asset for them because you have something which you can say if that technology is future proven, even if the company fails because the people might fail or it's not the time to go into that market, we have something and sell it later and sell the license to it later. So this is one of the strategies of the investors. Yeah. So I hope the question was answered from LinkedIn.
Yes. I mean, you say that that the market rules, of course, the market rules at the end. Yeah, the market tells you whether this is needed or not, what you're doing, and how the market wants it. And so I would say for every startup, it is extremely important to trying to understand markets, try to understand the needs from markets, and especially, let's say, future markets. I mean, that's the trick, yeah. That quite often when you say the more disruptive or the more innovative the solution is, the less the market is already established.
Yes.
And that is a certain hen and egg problem. And what would you say? How can market research and forecasting methods, how that can help to give to startups a realistic outlook? So what can go on in the future, and what exactly is needed, and how can we react to that? What do you think about that?
Yeah. If you can put on the slide share for a second again. So just to give an idea, this is a number slide from us, so from Eva, from the pitch deck. And this shows a number for the text analytics market. This is market research, yes? So this is a kind of estimation for companies who are trying to invest in text analytics because we want to analyze huge data masses and so on. So this is the kind of thing you might be able to obtain as a startup because someone has done some research in an area and you can purchase the report and you get the data. But that's not the normal case. So the point is, first of all, you want to be innovative, which means this is really new what you're doing. If it's new, you actually intend to create a market. So how do you measure a market which is not existing? So in the real
That's the
world,
problem, exactly. I mean, this is not just a startup problem. That's to a certain extent for every innovation. This is a cornerstone that that the innovation comes with a new approach and that generates at the end the market. So it was simply not there. Like the apps for the smartphone. So before we had an app store, we didn't know. Nobody knew that that we need apps and that an app store is a good idea. So the app store from Apple created that market,
yes,
which is huge now, but did not exist before.
Yeah. So you can stop the screen sharing and we can talk again directly. So this is just an example. I think that's a good point to remember. And the thing is, so this is one way to do it. And to talk about my experience with it, it's a challenge because what we do is actually something which is called contextual intelligence, which is the market. But contextual intelligence is usually advertising. So how to place ads in a contextual, nice environment so that it works better, it gives better responses. This is not our business. We are not in the advertising market. We're doing business intelligence. So, okay, our next thing was, are we business intelligence? This is the market. So, but now we start to compete with the big players in the market and they say, no, I'm not a BI tool in the classical sense. So it's text analytics, it's contextual, it's content analytics in some ways, just somewhere in between. So as a startup, you try to find the best approximation to what you're doing. This is one thing. The second thing is
Stefan, one thing puzzles me.
yeah.
Right now, I have a PhD work out there, and it's about it's about the S curve. You know the S curve, yeah. So when a new technology comes into the market, it takes a certain time, and then the early adopters come and buy it, and then more and more people buy it, and then the S curve starts to ramp up, and then we have a certain market saturation after a certain time. And this is, you can do that for refrigerators, for cathode ray tubes, for smartphones, for whatever. And what this PhD candidate is doing is looking for terminology. So when you file a patent, okay, or when you search for patents, you can do that with words. So you need terminology to describe what you what you invented. Yeah? And obviously, in patents, you really try to avoid a certain kind of language which narrows your claims. So you try to explain it as abstract as possible. So, or finding the right abstractness level. Yeah. And what this guy is doing, he says, okay, when we are in the beginning of a new technology, okay, think about, let's say, IoT, yeah, or whatever. In the beginning, we have only relatively few words, small vocabulary, which can be used to explain the technology and the application and everything. And later on, the more mature this technology becomes, okay, and we go up on the S-curve, the more differentiated becomes the terminology
Yes.
for applications, for variants of the technology, and so on. Yeah.
Hmm.
Take just let's say digital broadband or digital technology, digital communication technology. When we started with GSM, it was a very, I mean, the whole GSM standard had, I don't know, 140 patents, something like that. So today 5G has 35,000 standard essential patents.
Hmm.
Just this is the licensing package which you need to run a 5G issue, a gadget. And
Hmm.
so, which means it becomes extremely complex and
Hmm.
very differentiated. Lots of
Yes.
terminology around of
Yes.
digital mobile communication. So, what puzzling me is, let us assume we talk about a market which is not existing. How can you have a language, a terminology? So you say you're looking for context, but at the end, these contexts are a terminology. And how can you look for terminology which is not already existing?
Hmm. Okay, so I give you an example. Maybe we can share the screen again. So I found some slides which might be helpful to explain that. Maybe I can enlarge it a little bit. So this is basically the technology I have, right? So since I said we're measuring context, so we're measuring, in this case, it's the energy market, it's the Gazprom, RWE, exposure, utilities, energy companies. And these are kind of strategic fields we're working in. You can see the shares of the darker tiers, the more we are present in those kind of strategic markets. So one of the things I faced, as you described it very well, the problem of what is really the market? Can we find them? Can we define it? Can we define the terms which are near to that? Even if you want to see, understand what kind of patterns are around you. So one way is to do actually a kind of linguistic analysis, right? You need to try to figure out what's the common wording in the sphere. And so I did it here in the sense that now we know that Gazprom, RWE, Expo are in some fields are very close together, right? This is similar patterns. But Gazprom, for example, you can see it's natural gas and it's more related to war. Yes, we know why. And those kind of companies are more related to maybe nuclear power, like RWE, and Expo more to renewables. So these are changes in strategy. So helping to understand, trying to understand a competitive landscape gives an idea of near terms, yeah, in terms of phrases you can look for. You can even look for similar patterns from companies in that field. So that would be one way to do that. Another way, just as a thing of thought here, I make it a little bit smaller here. Uh, I'm fascinated by linguistic, right? And this is because language, and this is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis I'm actually referring to here. This says that language forms thinking, right? So if you try to figure out if you have a term you're looking for, like a technology you're researching because you need to understand the related patterns and so on, you can look for closely related terms, and this is linguistics. And you can do that by extracting a lot of data using documents, articles, and so on, and extracting the wording in that articles to find patterns of understanding, patterns of phrases which might be interesting to look for. The same with patterns itself, right? You can use patterns to do the same thing. Just the input is not articles from print or from news, it's a patterned article, which helps you to do the same analysis. Okay,
Yeah.
let me close that. You can close the screen sharing if you like. So these are just examples. This is ways how to actually narrow down the problem. And I did it with the same things you have been seeing here, like this one here. I did it myself to figure out what kind of competitive landscapes do I really have. And once I knew the companies, I actually did some research about did we file patents or not. So is there something which is visible from outside, observable in some ways. And then you can track it down to find, as a start again, to find the strategy, which means the niche you can fit in, trying to figure out what is really the purpose of what you're doing, the single purpose, which is basically also the most challenging thing as a startup, to find one purpose, right? Instead of I can do everything, you can serve everything, you need one thing. And this is helpful.
Yeah, got you. But at the end, it's how I'm saying, you need an existing terminology, but then you can use this terminology, and you can obviously observe the development of terminology. I think that is also a very interesting aspect, that simply companies want to know, for a certain technology, on which stage of the S curve are we. And
Yes.
with your analytics, you can really give a hint whether we are in the first flat phase, or we see an upcoming of a differentiation in terminology about a certain technology or about a certain market.
Yeah.
And this differentiation is typically associated with the majority of such a market or technology, and you can observe that over the time, right?
Yes, you can observe it over time, and you actually can do it in a more abstract way. So you can go away from the phrase for a second to really figure out what is the market you're serving. And this is the interesting thing, because when you usually start with an idea, you might not end up in the same market, because you have some pivots in between. You understand the business model might not be a good fit. You have to change that. You get to know people because you talk to companies. You get to know them as, hey, it's not me, but maybe my colleague is better suited. It's a different department, so you learn to know, okay, you're talking to different people, and you learn that the solution you're actually providing is a different thing. It's still the same thing, but it's a solution for someone else.
Yeah.
This means you have to think again about what is really inside of the scope of what you're doing. And this has some implications, again, on strategy and patent stuff. If you think about actually patenting your business model or your digital approach, you have to be clear about that. So you need to actually finish that kind of market fit phase first to really understand what is it.
I mean, to a certain extent, that leads to the question. So when these startups deal with, let's say, AI or classical software, so
Yes.
basically they see that this is given. This is simply an infrastructure which they use.
Yeah.
And a completely different question is, what should I patent? I mean, right now we prepare a big event with the European Patent Office in September for medtech, so software and AI patents in medical technologies.
Yes.
And we discussed, so what is the key message? What do we want to deliver to the audience? And
Hmm?
I would say one of the most important things is that when we talk about AI software development, so then we have a complex object. So it has to do with the business case, with the use case,
Yes.
with the technology which is used, with the business model. So the whole thing is complex, and
Hmm?
and basically nothing is invented per se. Yeah.
Hmm?
So it's not like a mechanical object where you say, okay, now it works. Yeah, that's it. That's my invention. And now I have the invention and I'm just wrapping around the patent. Okay. So that is the classical understanding. The inventor has an invention and goes to the patent attorney, and the patent attorney is wrapping around a patent around the invention. Okay. And when it comes to this digital software AI inventions, then the things are completely different. So here we don't have basically the invention. So when you ask a digital developer, do you have something invented? Then the digital developer said no. Yeah, and to a certain extent, what should be the source of knowledge that a digital developer knows that something is invented? I mean, that we assume when we ask a digital developer this question: did you invented something? Do you want to type an invention disclosure? So then we assume that this poor guy has a basic understanding of the case law of computer implemented inventions over the last 15 years. Yeah, so that he or she knows, yes, something is invented. This is my invention disclosure. Please wrap a pattern around it. So that doesn't make any sense. Which means, which obviously, yeah. So you can wait forever. This digital developer won't have the feeling something is invented. So that means that we have to explain to the AI software digital guys, when you develop something, then you have to make it, and if you want to apply patents, yeah, then you have to develop it in a way that patents can be applied, that what you did becomes an invention, and not is an invention per se or by nature. Yeah, and that really changes the perspective on the whole thing, on IP strategies and whatever, which means we have to make it patentable, which means we need money for that. So we need a budget, we need resources, we have to think about it, and that is maybe, so we have a degree of freedom here. So what exactly should be seen as the invention, yeah, when it is not God-given, okay? And then we have to ask the question, because patents are forbidding rights, who do we want to forbid what? And that leads us to the business model. And that is a bit what is your, let's say, recommendation when it comes to IP protection? Let's stay with patents, yeah. When it comes to patents and the fact that the software itself or the AI solution is a commodity, what is your recommendation how the companies should behave here?
I mean, one of the things, and I would actually frame the problem slightly different. If I look at what we do from a model perspective, from a tech perspective, you have actually a problem like what we do. We actually try to figure out what's the meaning in text. I give an example which I had from a Google project in 2017 when we got an award from Google. I actually fund to solve a problem like trying to figure out what's the content of a piece of article. And when we started to work on that from a technical perspective, trying to solve the problem, it was working with different mathematical models. It's not just like we have something like a tag, which is X, and you get that output epsilon. It's not how it works. It's just like for a certain problem, you might even change the model of solving it in the process of doing the work. So what do you want to patent in that case, right? So it can't be the maths and can't be the technology in the sense of code, what you have. It's more like what's the solution type of thing you're doing. And even if a car you're driving change based on the environment you're driving, right? This is the problem we need to face. This is one thing. The second thing is those models outdate. So you have to fix them always. And still technology does not stand still. It's moving forward. If you look at the mathematical models, which we now use with deep learning, for example, it's a completely different thing. It has changed a lot of scientific work and a lot of in the market in terms of product substantially. And working with a new technology, we need to be flexible as a company, not to fix by an IP right. Yeah, to say, okay, we can't go outside because this is what we do. No, we can't change that. No, it doesn't make sense. So we need to find a way to actually find what are you doing in terms of what is the stable part of it, it should be IP in the very core.
I mean, a funny thing, excuse me, a funny thing is that that so many misunderstandings are out there. Yeah.
Yes.
So I had a wonderful an interview for a research study with a CTO from a big mid-sized company here in Germany, very digital company, and he explained me, what you can patent and what not.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, and he said, I am a computer scientist, and so I know this and I know that and blah blah. And I thought, isn't that crazy that this guy has me on phone? And I asked him some questions. Yeah, I asked him, one of these questions is, why do you think we have such a big lack of invention disclosures here, for example, in Europe, especially in Germany, from digital experts? Why do you think it is so? Yeah, and the answer was, because you cannot patent that. I mean, I don't believe that. Yeah, because then the assumption is that the digital expert understands case law of computer implemented inventions for the last 15 years. I mean, that's ridiculous. So it is fascinating that that people try to work with extremely simple bypasses or I don't know, thinking logics, and to a certain extent they fall in love with these software cannot be patented, even when, I mean, I told him then, I tried to explain, look, what we see is that people patent use cases. They patent business model approaches. What they patent is what you can see, what you see on what is offered, the customer benefit. And of course, always the technical implementation of these objects. But this is what is patented. And not the nitty-gritty detail of any software code. Nobody wants to patent them. And he didn't, so he was unable to follow my explanation. I mean, it's exactly what you say, Stefan. You focus on the stable thing, and especially you focus on things which others can see, because you want to enforce your patents, and you have to detect the infringement. And I can only detect infringements when I can see them. So what I patent is what I have to disclose in my business models to third parties. I mean, this is not rocket science, but quite often, let's say, technicians or people who love technology forget that this is the cornerstone, that you can enforce it based on the behavior of your competitors.
You know what funny is, I would actually put IP attorneys on my Christmas wish list as part of the team, right? So you say from the beginning you have someone who has the knowledge inside of the team, so we can work on finding those parts of the solution which can be patented together with the team. So you have the experts always with you. This is one thing. The second thing is there might be cases where we think as a startup entrepreneur that it's better not to disclose what you're doing, because you see, okay, you have that kind of lack of speed, right? This is one of the crucial things. So if you come from academia, this was one startup type we discussed in the beginning. That's fine because you have that runway. But in my business, in my situation, it's a little bit different. So you have to move very fast. So I can't wait a half a year to get an IP fixed, right? So we need to move fast forward, and we can't wait until we're there, because we need to do business. We need to actually disclose what we're doing, because we want to win clients. So you know, there is a problem with that. If you disclose too much, is it really you again, or is it open to anybody? So there are some certain pitfalls with that involved. And the third thing is,
Stefan, about pitfalls.
just one thing to finish it. So one thing is the funding for it. So okay, there's some public funding of helping us to get money for doing the IP rights stuff, right? at least in Germany. I'm not really sure how it is in other countries. But in Germany, we know that we get some funding, at least part of it. But if you're very short in money in the beginning, it's pretty hard to allocate that money for IP. You're really trying to move forward and trying to be the first mover in the market to have that kind of competitive advantage. And later to think about what kind of things can be patented and secured in some ways. And in my case, it's also very process oriented. So what we do is actually process. It's not IP code, IT code. It's some part of IT code, but it's process being, which means I actually need to be. I'm actually selling data in the end. Yeah, I'm selling information pieces, which is at the very core of what we're doing. You sell a certain type of information which is not available if you do it otherwise, or it's really hard to get those information with a lot of money for. And this is the part which I have actually not find a solution or ready answer yet. Does it make sense to try to get a patent for it or not? And when does it make sense? And can I allocate the money at the moment for that? I think yes, but it's difficult. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Let just a second for the pitfalls. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, people who say software cannot be patented, yeah, they think at the same time others could not have patents for that. Yeah. So we have a growth rate here in Europe, and this is more or less the same to the IP5, to the big five offices: US, Koreans, Chinese, Japanese. We have a growth rate of around 1,400% on digital patents, software patents, which patent exactly what I said. Yeah, business models, use cases, apps, and so on. And people who think this kind of digital solutions cannot be patented, they think others cannot have patents for that. So what we see again and again is that these software and AI startups, they think that just because they deal with software, nobody could have a patent for that. And they simply ignore around 65,000 patent applications a year at the EPO. I mean, this is crazy. Yeah. What do you think? Is that rational ignorance? So how can we deal with that? That sooner or later somebody comes up and says, "Thank you very much that you developed that, but I have patented." Yeah. So how can we proceed on such a situation?
I think you actually started to solve the problem in parts. It's communication, right? So when I actually got to know you, it was the first. I assume it was the first time I heard someone say it's not an issue to file a patent for software or for digital business. And I was like, okay. So this drew my attention to what we are doing. And so what I learned is this is communication. I learned softwares, you can't patent software, which was a learning, 10, 15 years ago, or something like that. So this is history. The entrepreneurs today might come up with not that kind of burden in history. So you have a chance and opportunity actually but you have to be active. So since we have some IP lawyers listening to us today, I can only recommend try to educate the market, go out and try to help the startups understand what you can actually do.
Yeah.
Try to help them to get rid of the misconceptions in that sense, that you can actually show by example what kind of things have been patented in the past. And if you can combine it with some kind of business reasoning, like patents are assets which you can actually help to investors to mitigate the risk, because they have low risk here, because you have something to sell in the end, even if there's no chair anymore in the office. This is a good thing. So this is going out, educating, talking, presenting it.
Okay, that are the final words. Thank you very much, Steffen, for giving your insights and explaining what you're doing around the application of AI. I thank you also, Tobias, for being available on LinkedIn. So please, when there are more questions, you want to discuss something, we are available on LinkedIn the whole evening, and we are happy to discuss that with you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Take care, and enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.